My name is Benjamin Carter. I am 70 years old, and I am currently being denied entry to my own son's wedding. I stood before the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood Country Club. The same gates I'd driven through 100 times, usually after a long week at the office. Two security guardsmen built like refrigerators and wearing ill-fitting black suits blocked my path. The younger one looked at his clipboard. "I'm sorry, sir. You're not on the list." I let out a short, confused laugh. There must be some mistake. I adjusted the cuffs of my Tom Ford suit, the one I'd had tailor-made for this exact day. "I'm Benjamin Carter. I'm the father of the groom." The older guard didn't flinch. He just stared at me with dead eyes. "Name's not on the list, sir." "Listen," I said, and I could feel the irritation rising in my voice. This was embarrassing. Guests were starting to arrive, parking their Mercedes and Audis, walking past me with polite, curious smiles. They all knew who I was. I was Ben Carter. "This is my son, Dylan Carter. I am the one paying for this entire event." I gestured to the sprawling lawn, the massive white tents, the faint sound of a string quartet already warming up. "I'm the one who paid your $250,000 membership fee so he could even belong to this ridiculous club." This club. Sarah, my late wife, she always found it pretentious. "Why do we need to pay that much just to eat mediocre crab cakes, Ben?" she'd ask. I did it for Dylan, because he wanted it. He wanted the prestige, the connections, the look of success. The success I had already earned for him through 45 years of sweat and steel. I built Carter Construction from a single pickup truck and a toolbox. I dealt with concrete rebar, impossible deadlines, and corrupt city inspectors. I thought I knew what tough was. But this was a new kind of humiliation. The older guard sighed, clearly annoyed by my persistence. "Sir, I don't care who you are. My instructions are clear." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a photograph. Of me. A recent one, too. Probably taken from the security cameras at my own home. The home he was living in. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. The guard held the photo up next to my face as if comparing a mugshot for the benefit of the passing guests. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. Mr. Dylan Carter was very specific with his instructions. He said, and I quote, "If this old man shows up, throw him out." Throw him out. The words echoed in the perfect manicured silence of the club's entrance. This old man. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't feel my legs. I looked past the guard's shoulder up toward the main clubhouse to the wide balcony overlooking the lawn. And I saw them. My son Dylan in his custom tuxedo, and beside him his bride Brooke, looking radiant in her white gown. They were holding champagne flutes. They were looking right at me. They weren't hiding. They were watching. As I locked eyes with my son, he didn't look away in shame. He didn't rush down to fix this horrible mistake. He smiled. A slow, arrogant, dismissive smile. Then he raised his glass, toasting me, his father, who was standing on the public pavement like a beggar. Beside him, Brooke burst into laughter. A bright, tinkling laugh that carried on the breeze. The same laugh I'd once thought was so charming. Now it sounded like breaking glass. I stood there frozen. 70 years old. The man who built an empire from nothing. The man who gave his son everything. And I was being thrown out of his wedding. How did it come to this? How did the boy I taught to ride a bike, the young man I sent to Wharton, the son I trusted with my entire legacy, turn into this monster? It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow poison. It started 6 months ago. The day I buried Sarah, my wife of 45 years. The day my world ended, and the day their plan truly began. The funeral was a blur of black suits and whispered condolences. I remember the sound of the dirt hitting Sarah's casket. a hollow final thud that seemed to echo inside my own chest. I stood there, a 70-year-old statue, long after everyone else had gone back to their cars. When I returned to the house, the silence was deafening. For 45 years, this house had been filled with her. Her laughter, the smell of her baking bread on Saturdays, the sound of her humming as she paid the bills in her small office. Now it was just empty, a museum of a life that was over. That evening, Dylan and Brooke arrived, suitcases in hand. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone," Dylan said, his voice thick with a concern that seemed genuine. "Brooke and I are moving in. Just for a while. Just until you're back on your feet." Brooke, always so bright and efficient, was already directing him. "I'll take the upstairs guest room. We can set you up downstairs, Dylan, so we're close if he needs anything." She turned to me and squeezed my arm. Her grip was firm. "Don't you worry about a single thing, Ben. We're here now. You've worked your entire life for this family. It's our turn to take care of you." I was too numb to argue. Grateful, even. The thought of navigating this suffocating silence alone was terrifying. "Thank you," I managed to whisper. "Thank you, kids." I am Ben Carter. I can read structural blueprints like a novel. I can tell you the load-bearing capacity of a steel I-beam just by looking at it. I built Carter Construction from a single pickup truck, 2 hammers, and a will of iron. I turned it into a $300 million company that changed the skyline of this city. But Sarah was the architect of our life. I built the buildings, but she built the home. She handled the investments. She paid the bills. She managed the trusts, the stocks, the passwords. My God, the passwords. Our entire existence was locked behind strings of letters and numbers she had memorized, stored in a digital world I never bothered to learn. I'm 70 years old. I still prefer a legal pad and a number 2 pencil. A few days after they moved in, I wandered into Sarah's office. Her laptop was sitting on the desk, dark and silent. I tried to turn it on just to, I don't know, feel close to her. It asked for a password. I typed Sarah 123. Access denied. I typed Carter Const. Access denied. I was the chairman of the board, and I was locked out of my own life. Brooke found me there, staring at the blank screen. She had a cup of tea in her hand for me. "Oh, Ben," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. She put the tea down and sat in Sarah's chair. It felt wrong. The chair swallowed her small frame, but she looked comfortable. She touched the laptop. "Mom's files are so complicated. Look at all these spreadsheets she had." Her fingers flew across the trackpad, trying different things. "Goodness, her passwords are just impossible. She must have had a different one for everything." She looked up at me with that sweet, pitying smile. "You poor thing. You shouldn't be worrying your head about this." Dylan appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. "See, Dad. This is what we're here for. This is the small stuff. You just rest. Mourn. We'll handle all this." Brooke nodded eagerly. "Exactly. I can consolidate everything. I'll call the banks the utilities. I can reset all these old accounts, move everything over to a new, simpler system. Something we can all access easily. It will be so much better for you." I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. Yes, that was what I needed. Someone to handle it. Someone to take this impossible burden off my shoulders. I was just a grieving old man. I was tired. So very tired. That would be good," I said, my voice barely audible. "Thank you, Brooke. I don't know what I'd do without you two." "Of course, Dad," Dylan said, walking over to put his hand on my shoulder. "We're family. We protect our own." Brooke smiled, her eyes already fixed on the screen. "Don't you worry about a thing," she said again. "I'll get started right away." I walked out of the office, leaving her there in Sarah's chair at Sarah's desk. taking control of Sarah's world. I felt the first real peace I'd felt since the funeral. I was an idiot. I mistook the feeling of a lamb being led to slaughter for the feeling of being safe. It was a full week after the funeral. A week of people bringing casseroles I couldn't eat and offering sympathies I couldn't hear. The doctor had given me Ativan. "Just to get you through the nights, Ben," he'd said. But the nights bled into the days, and I found myself taking them just to dull the sharp edges of the silence. I was in Sarah's office, her chair. I sat there, my hand resting on the smooth wood of her desk, right where her hand used to be. The room still smelled faintly of her, a mix of old books and the rose-scented lotion she used. I was just staring at the wall, staring at the framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon in '98. We looked so young. Dylan knocked softly, but he didn't wait for an answer. He just pushed the door open and came in, a neat blue folder in his hand. He had that look on his face, the one of dutiful concern. "Hey, Dad, how are you feeling?" I just grunted, my throat thick. I didn't have the words for how I was feeling. He walked over and placed the folder on the desk, right on top of Sarah's immaculate blotter. "Dad, I hate to bother you with this right now, I really do, but there's some paperwork." I blinked, trying to focus. The pills made everything swim slightly. "Paperwork? Yeah," he said, pulling up the small visitor's chair. His voice was so reasonable, so calm. "I was on the phone all morning. The bank, the power company, the mortgage lender. They won't talk to me, Dad. They won't even confirm the account balances without your authorization. It's all privacy laws, you know." He pushed the folder an inch closer. "It's just a stack of papers, just forms. It's just so I can pay your small bills for you. The power, the water, the cable. I just need temporary access to make sure nothing gets shut off while you're, while you're taking time." My head felt like it was full of cotton. I don't know, Dylan. Your mother, she always... "I know, Dad. I know she did," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of patience. "And that's why I'm here. To take that burden off you." And he pulled a sleek, expensive-looking pen from his jacket pocket and opened the folder. He flipped through the pages quickly, just a blur of dense black text that my eyes couldn't catch. "This one's for the bank. This one's for the utilities. This one lets me talk to the mortgage company." He made it sound so simple. Just housekeeping. He stopped on a page that had a bright yellow "Sign Here" sticker. I squinted. The words on the header were large, and even through the medicinal haze I could make them out. Power of attorney. A small, cold prick of unease, a tiny alarm bell tried to ring somewhere deep inside the fog. Temporary access. I asked, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. Dylan let out a soft, understanding laugh, as if I were a child asking a silly question. "Yes, Dad. It's just basic medical and financial power of attorney. It's completely standard. It's just in case. God forbid, what if you got sick? What if you fell and were in the hospital for a week? Who would pay the bills? Who would talk to the doctors? It just lets me step in if you need me. It's just a precaution, Dad." He leaned in, his face a mask of sincerity. "Brooke's dad has one for her. It's what families do. It's just me. Taking care of you. Like you've always taken care of me." Taking care of me. The words landed like a warm blanket. Yes. That's what I needed. I needed to be taken care of. I didn't want to think about banks or bills. I just wanted the aching hole in my chest to close. I just wanted to rest. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. Not from age, but from the grief, the exhaustion, the pills. I scrawled my name on the line. Benjamin Carter. It was barely legible, a spidery, broken version of my once firm signature. Dylan didn't miss a beat. He turned the page. "And here," I signed again. And just one more here. I signed again. Great, he said, his voice bright, almost cheerful. He neatly closed the folder with a soft final thud. The sound was sickeningly heavy. See, all done. He stood up, slipping the pen and the folder under his arm. That's it. You don't have to worry about a single thing anymore. Now why don't you go lie down? I'll have Brooke bring you some soup in a bit. He patted me on the shoulder, a firm proprietary gesture. You just rest, Dad. I've got this now. I watched him walk out of the office, taking my life with him in that slim blue folder. I felt a sudden sharp chill, but I dismissed it. It was just the grief. It was just the empty room. He was a good son. He loved me. He was taking care of me. I slumped back in Sarah's chair and closed my eyes, letting the fog roll back in, letting the silence swallow me whole. I trusted him. I trusted my son. 3 months passed. The fog of the Ativan and the initial crushing weight of grief began to lift. It was replaced by a dull, constant ache, a hollowness that I knew would never really go away. The casseroles from neighbors stopped coming. The sympathy calls trickled to a stop. It was just me and the two of them living in my house. I'd started trying to find a new routine. I took long walks. I visited Sarah's grave, talking to the cold marble stone as if she could hear me. And I started doing the one thing Sarah always did on the first of the month. I opened the mail. I'm not a computer guy. I like the feel of paper. I always had my main trust account statements mailed to the house, a habit Sarah had called old-fashioned but never tried to break. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the one Sarah and I ate breakfast at every day for 45 years. I put on my reading glasses, my hand shaking slightly as I tore open the envelope from the bank. I saw the usual things. The mortgage payment, which was odd. I thought I'd paid that house off decades ago. The utilities higher than I remembered. And then I saw it. A single line item that made my hand stop halfway to my coffee cup. A wire transfer dated 2 months prior. $75,000. Paid to a company I'd never heard of in my life. BK Designs. $75,000. I read the number 3 times, pushing my glasses up my nose. That wasn't a utility bill. That wasn't small stuff. $75,000. Carter Construction didn't spend that much on concrete in a week. That was more than I paid for my first house back in 1978. I knew Dylan and Brooke were planning the wedding. I'd given them my blessing. I'd told them not to worry about the cost, that I'd take care of it. It was the last big gift Sarah and I had planned to give them together. But $75,000 in one payment. For what a deposit. It seemed obscenely high, even for the kind of lavish wedding Brooke always talked about. Brooke was in the living room, curled on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, probably looking at flower arrangements or whatever it is you look at for a wedding. "Brooke," I said. I tried to keep my voice casual, but it came out sounding strained. She looked up, her smile bright and automatic. "Yes, Ben." I walked over, holding the paper. "Honey, I was just looking at the bank statement. Do you know anything about this charge of BK Designs?" She looked up from her phone and squinted at the paper. Then she laughed. A high, airy laugh, as if I'd just told a silly, slightly senile joke. "Oh, Dad. Ben," she said, using that name that always sounded slightly wrong on her tongue. "You're such a worrywart." "It's $75,000, Brooke. That's a lot of money." "Of course it is," she said, as if it were obvious. "That's the wedding planner, gosh. I'm so sorry I told you about her last week. You must have forgotten." I stared at her. I had no memory of that conversation. "BK Designs," she continued. "It stands for Beverly K. She is the best planner in the state. She did the Vanderbilt's daughter's wedding. She's impossible to book, Ben, honestly." I was still frowning at the amount. "As a deposit," she adopted that patient tone, the one you use for a child who just can't understand. Ben, it's not just a deposit. It's the retainer. It locks in her and the venue and the caterer. Everything. We're getting a deal, honestly. Her normal fee is almost double that. She reached out and patted my hand, the one holding the statement. Her skin was soft, her nails perfectly manicured. "And don't you remember?" she said, her voice dropping to that sweet, gentle tone. "When we were discussing it, you specifically told me. You looked right at me and said, 'Brooke, this is your day. Get the best. Don't worry about the cost.' You said that, Ben. Don't you remember?" Did I? I searched my fogged memory. I remembered a vague conversation about the wedding, about wanting them to be happy. In the depths of my grief, I might have said anything. Get the best. It sounded like something I'd say. I'd always given my children the best. I guess I did. I stammered, feeling foolish. The suspicion drained out of me, replaced by embarrassment. "I'm sorry, honey. My mind's it's been all over the place since your mother." "Of course it has," she said, her smile returning instantly now that the crisis was averted. "You poor thing. Stop looking at those boring papers. It's all taken care of. That's why we're here." She gently took the statement from my hand, folded it neatly, and placed it on a side table as if dismissing it. "Now I really need your opinion on centerpieces. Are you feeling peonies or garden roses?" I let her lead me to the couch, feeling the familiar fog of confusion and guilt settle back over me. I felt ashamed. Here I was questioning them when they were doing exactly what I'd asked, taking care of everything. My memory really must be going. I was just a forgetful, grieving old man. I apologized again. "I'm sorry for doubting you, Brooke." "It's okay, Ben," she said, already scrolling through pictures of flowers on her phone. "Don't give it another thought." I let the wedding planner issue go. I told myself I was just being a miser counting pennies when I should be celebrating my son's happiness. I was grieving. I was irritable. It was my fault for being suspicious. A few weeks passed. I started venturing out of the house, trying to reconnect with the world. I had lunch with my daughter, Emily. She was worried about me, but she was busy with her own law practice in the city. "Are you sure you're okay, Dad, Dylan, and Brooke? Are they being good to you?" "They're wonderful," I assured her. "I don't know what I'd do without them." She nodded, but her eyes, so much like Sarah's, held a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Then one Tuesday, I got a call from Frank Reynolds. Frank and I had been friendly rivals in the construction business for 30 years. We'd bid against each other, stolen crews from each other, and shared more than a few whiskeys at industry conventions. He was a good man. "Ben," his gruff voice came over the line. "I just heard about Sarah. My God, Ben, I'm just so sorry. She was one of the greats, truly." "Thank you, Frank. That means a lot coming from you." "I mean it," he said. "Listen, I won't keep you. I wanted to pass on my condolences. And hey," his voice shifted, becoming lighter. "On a happier note, I saw your boy Dylan yesterday. He and his fiancée were at the Audi dealership over in Westmont when I was getting my car serviced." I felt a slight, undefinable tightening in my chest. "Oh, really?" "Yeah, congratulations are in order. That new R8 is a hell of a machine. A rocket ship. Kid's doing well for himself, huh? $180,000 for a set of wheels. You taught him right." I tried to keep my voice even. "An R8, you said, silver. That's the one." He was grinning ear to ear. "Look, Ben, you take care of yourself. Let's get a steak when you're feeling up to it." I hung up the phone. $180,000. I sat there staring at the kitchen wall. I'm not a stingy father. I paid for Dylan's Wharton MBA. I gave him a job as a vice president at Carter Construction. I pay him a salary of $250,000 a year, plus bonuses. It's a fantastic living. But it is not by any stretch of the imagination the kind of living that allows you to drop $180,000 on a two-seater supercar like it's a trip to the grocery store. Not unless you were saving for years. Not unless you had no mortgage, no student debt, and no plans for a $75,000 wedding. This was different from the planner's fee. That was my money. This was his money. Where did he get it? My mind felt cloudy again. Maybe Frank was mistaken. Maybe it was a different car. Maybe Dylan was just looking. He and Brooke came home a few hours later, loaded with shopping bags from high-end department stores. "Just picking up a few more things for the honeymoon," Brooke chirped, kissing my cheek as she breezed past. Dylan followed, loosening his tie. "Long day, Dad. Anything new with you?" I had to ask. The question was sitting like a stone in my gut. I ran into Frank Reynolds today. Well, he called. Dylan's smile didn't waver, but his eyes, they went still. "Oh yeah, how's that old dinosaur doing?" "He's fine. He said he saw you at the Audi dealership. He mentioned you bought an R8. The air in the room changed. It was so subtle I almost missed it. Brooke, who had been halfway up the stairs, stopped dead. Dylan let out a practiced, easy laugh. "Oh, that. Yeah, can you believe it? Crazy, right? It's a lot of car, son." He walked over to the minibar, the one Sarah had stocked, and poured himself a generous glass of whiskey. "It's not my car, Dad. You think I could afford that thing? No. It's Brooke's." I blinked. "Brooke's?" He took a sip. "Yeah, it was a wedding gift. From her father." He smiled, shaking his head as if in disbelief. "Her parents are just ridiculously generous. They wired the money to her account last week. She's been wanting that car for years. Her dad just said, 'Go get it, honey. Welcome to the family.' You know how they are." Brooke finally turned around on the stairs, her face a picture of innocent delight. "Isn't it amazing, Ben? I was so surprised. My dad is just the sweetest. It's a little flashy for me, but what can you do?" She giggled. "It's so fast." I didn't know what to say. It sounded perfectly plausible. I'd met Brooke's parents once or twice. They seemed wealthy. They lived in a large gated community. They wore expensive clothes. A $180,000 gift. It was obscene, but for people like that, maybe it was just normal. "Well," I said, feeling the suspicion drain away again, replaced by that familiar, dull embarrassment. That's quite a gift. Congratulations, Brooke." "Thanks, Ben," she beamed. "You'll have to come for a ride. Once I figure out how to drive it without peeling out." Dylan raised his glass. "To generous fathers-in-law, right, Dad?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Right. Well, that's wonderful, kids." I went back to my study. The explanation made sense. It was logical. It fit. So why did I have this cold, sour feeling in the pit of my stomach? Why did it feel like I had just been handed another perfectly wrapped, beautiful lie? I shook my head, angry at myself. I was becoming paranoid. I was a grieving, suspicious old man, just like they thought. I had to stop. I had to just trust my son. Sunday dinners were Sarah's sacred time. The first few after her death were hollow, ghost-like affairs. Dylan and Brooke insisted we keep the tradition. "It's what Mom would have wanted," Dylan said. My daughter Emily drove in from her city apartment. Her presence was a small comfort, a piece of Sarah still at the table. This Sunday was different, though. There was a forced cheerfulness. Brooke was telling an animated story about a bridesmaid dress fitting, her hands flying as she spoke. "And then the seamstress. Oh, you should have seen her face," Brooke said, reaching across the table to pour Dylan more wine. As she lifted the bottle, the light from the dining room chandelier caught something on her wrist. It was an explosion of diamonds. A watch so bright, it was almost vulgar. It was white gold, or maybe platinum, and the entire face and bezel were paved in stones. Emily, who had been quietly picking at her salad, stopped. Her eyes locked onto Brooke's wrist. Brooke noticed us looking. She paused her story and held her hand out as if presenting it. "Oh, this old thing," she said with a girlish false modesty. She made a point of looking right at me. "It's a family heirloom. My mother insisted I wear it for the wedding. She wore it at hers. It belonged to my grandmother." She sighed, touching the diamonds with her other hand. "It's almost too much, don't you think? But I can't say no to Mom." I stared at it. I'm a construction man. I don't know a thing about high fashion, but I know machinery. I know precision engineering, and a watch like that, a Patek Philippe. I could see the name faintly on the dial. That wasn't just jewelry. It was a machine. And this machine looked like it had just come out of the box. There wasn't a single scratch on the gold. The crystal was perfect. The diamonds were set in a modern style, not the old-fashioned settings my mother had on her engagement ring. Dylan beamed. "Looks great on you, honey. A classic." A classic. The word hung in the air. Brooke smiled sweetly at me. "I hope you like it, Ben. I know it's a bit flashy, but it's tradition." "It's lovely, Brooke," I managed to say. "Very bright." A few minutes later, she stood up to clear the plates. Dessert time. I actually managed not to burn the apple pie this time. She gathered the dishes and disappeared into the kitchen. The moment the swinging door closed, I leaned across the table toward Emily. I kept my voice low. "That's a hell of an heirloom. Looks brand new to me." Emily didn't look up from her plate. She just pushed her green beans around with her fork. "That's because it is," she whispered, her voice sharp and cold. "What do you mean?" Emily finally looked up at me. Her eyes were just like Sarah's, clear, intelligent, and incapable of missing a single detail. "That's a Patek Philippe Calatrava, Dad. The high jewelry model. Reference 7200/200R. They announced it at Watches and Wonders last year. It's 6 months old. Tops." I was floored. How do you know that?" Emily gave me a dry look. "I'm a lawyer, Dad. I deal with high-value asset division and divorces all the time. I know exactly what I'm looking at. That watch retails for $95,000. Unless her grandmother was a time traveler, it's not an heirloom." $95,000. The number hit me almost as hard as the one for the car. I thought back to what Dylan had said. A classic. He had lied too. He knew. He was in on it. A $180,000 gift from her father. A $95,000 heirloom from her mother. We were approaching $300,000 in gifts in just a few weeks. All while my son was supposedly planning a wedding with his fiancée's family money. The kitchen door swung open. Brooke walked back in holding the pie. She was smiling, flushed with victory from the kitchen. "Who's ready for dessert, Ben? I got the vanilla bean ice cream you like." She set the pie on the table, completely unaware that her lie had just been surgically dismantled. I looked at her smiling, innocent face. Then I looked at Emily. Emily gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A clear message. "Not now, Dad. Not here." I forced my own face into a smile. The muscles in my cheeks felt stiff, alien. "It looks wonderful, dear. Thank you." As she cut the pie, I felt a chill settle over me that had nothing to do with the ice cream. The Audi R8 was one thing. A gift is a gift. But this was a lie. A pointless, elaborate, and incredibly expensive lie. Why would she lie about a watch? If she could lie so easily about a $95,000 heirloom, what else was she lying about? The pie tasted like ash in my mouth. I watched Brooke and Dylan laugh and talk with Emily, the perfect happy couple. But all I could see was the $95,000 lie glittering on her wrist. Emily caught my eye one last time, a silent warning, before she gathered her things to leave. "Take care of yourself, Dad," she said, hugging me tightly. "And be careful." Her words lingered long after she was gone. After that Sunday, I started to watch. It wasn't just a vague feeling of unease anymore. It was a cold, hard, necessary observation. And the first thing I noticed was the phone. Brooke's cell phone, which had always been left casually on the kitchen counter or the coffee table, was now her constant companion. It never left her sight. It was either in her hand in her pocket or clutched upside down on her lap. And it started ringing at odd hours, not with a loud, cheerful ringtone, but with a discreet buzz, a low vibration that would make her jump every single time. "Oh, goodness," she'd say, glancing at the screen. "Just my mother again." She'd smile at me, a tight, false smile, get up and walk out of the room. If I was in the living room, she'd go to the kitchen. If I was in the kitchen, she'd step out onto the patio. If I was on the patio, she'd lock herself in the master bathroom, the sound of the fan whirring loudly to cover the sound of her voice. The secrecy was a living thing in the house. It was constant. 4 or 5 times a day, this little performance would repeat. The buzz, the jump, the fake smile, the hurried exit. I tried to be casual about it. One afternoon, I was in the den trying to read the Wall Street Journal, though the words were just swimming in front of my eyes. Her phone buzzed on the arm of the sofa. She snatched it up so fast she nearly knocked over my cold coffee. "My goodness, Brooke," I said, trying to sound amused. "You're more popular than the president. Who is that keeping you so busy?" She let out an exasperated sigh, a performance of pure frustration. "Ugh, you won't believe it, Ben. It's the flower vendors. Again." "The flower vendors? Yes," she said, rolling her eyes. "They are so disorganized. They keep mixing up the peonies with the ranunculus, and the invoice is all wrong. I have to micromanage everything, or this wedding will be a complete disaster. Honestly, I'm doing Beverly Kay's job for her." It sounded plausible. Wedding planning was stressful. I'd seen Sarah go through it with Emily's wedding, though not this neurotically. "Well," I said, "don't let them push you around." "Oh, I won't," she said, her eyes flashing. She stepped out into the garden, closing the sliding glass door firmly behind her. The moment it shut, her face changed. Her sweet, flustered expression vanished, replaced by a cold hardness. "Listen, I told you." Her voice was immediately sharp, all business, before the glass cut her off. The lie about the flower vendors might have worked for a day, but flower vendors don't call at 10 o'clock at night. I was in my bedroom trying to read an old biography of General Patton, but the words wouldn't stick. The house was quiet. Dylan was supposedly at a late project meeting. Brooke was downstairs, or so I thought. Then I heard it. The soft metallic shush of the sliding door to the patio opening and closing. I got up from my chair. My old knees ached, but I moved silently. I went to the window of my bedroom, which overlooks the back garden. She was down there, a small dark silhouette, pacing back and forth on the stone patio, illuminated only by the faint blue glow of the pool lights. She was speaking in a low, furious whisper. I couldn't hear most of it. Just fragments. "Cannot wait. Ridiculous. Move it now." I opened my window just a crack. The cool night air hit my face. Her voice became clearer. She had stopped pacing and was standing right below me, her back to the house. "I don't care what he prefers," she hissed into the phone. "The R8 is already raising questions. We have to be smarter." My blood went cold. The R8, the gift from her father. She listened for a moment, then spoke again, her voice sharp as a razor. "No, he knows nothing. He is exactly what Dylan said. A grieving, clueless old man. He believes every word I say." clueless old man. Just move the money, she commanded. Use the Apex account, not the main one. I want it routed through Apex before the end of the week. Do you understand me good? She clicked the phone off and stood there in the dark for a long moment, breathing hard. Then she turned and went back inside, sliding the door closed with a barely audible sound. I stood at the window, my hands gripping the sill so hard my knuckles were white. He knows nothing. A grieving, clueless old man. He believes every word I say. The insults stung, but they were nothing compared to the one word that was now burning a hole in my brain. Apex. She said to move the money through Apex. I walked back to my desk and pulled out the bank statement I had hidden in my bottom drawer. The $75,000 charge. I stared at it. BK Designs. BK Designs was the wedding planner. Apex was where the money was moving. These were not the same thing. This wasn't wedding planning. This was something else. This was something hidden, something dark. And they were using me, the clueless old man, to do it. My mind was still reeling from the Apex conversation. The words clueless old man had become a permanent echo in my head. I tried to push it aside. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe Brooke was just stressed. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. It was the end of the month. I was in the kitchen reading the paper the old-fashioned way when Dylan came downstairs. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit. He was just in slacks and a polo shirt, and he looked wrecked. His hair was a mess and he had dark circles under his eyes. He was pacing by the island, running his hands through his hair. "You all right, son?" I asked, lowering the paper. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." He stopped and managed a weak, stressed-out smile. "Hey, Dad. Yeah, I'm just dealing with some headaches at the office. The glorious life of management, right?" Headaches. What kind of headaches? I thought things were going well. He sighed, a long theatrical sound, like a man truly burdened. It's cash flow, Dad. It's a nightmare. You know that big waterfront project, the O'Malley contract?" I nodded. "The O'Malley contract. That's a $50 million job. Should be wrapping up." "Exactly. And they're late on their 30-day invoice. 35 days late. It's holding up everything. And the city is slow on the municipal bond payment for the new arena. It's all hitting at once." This was strange. Carter Construction is a $300 million company. We have massive operating accounts and a $50 million revolving line of credit specifically for moments like this. We never have cash flow problems. In 40 years, Sarah never let a client go 35 days late without freezing their assets. "So call O'Malley," I said, my voice flat. "Tell him to pay his damn bills." "I can't, Dad," Dylan said, his voice rising with exasperation. "It's delicate. If I push too hard, we lose the next contract. It's politics. You wouldn't... it's just a different way of doing business now." I felt the sting again. The clueless old man implication. "You don't understand how the modern world works." "I see," I said quietly. "So what's the problem?" He wouldn't look me in the eye. He stared at the granite countertop. "The problem is payroll. Payroll for the guys on the ground. The crew. It's due Friday. And because those two big payments are late, we're short." I stopped my coffee mug halfway to my mouth. Short Carter Construction is short Dylan. "What about the line of credit?" "I've already tapped a lot of it," he said quickly, "for materials for the new projects. I'm over-leveraged for the quarter. It's a temporary pinch, Dad. Just really, really bad timing." He finally looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. That same earnest look he used to give me when he was 12 and wanted a new baseball glove. "Look, I hate to even ask this. It's embarrassing. But your pension payment, it's due to transfer from the company account tomorrow. And it's a big one." It was. It was my reward for a lifetime of work. "I was just wondering," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "if maybe Just for this 1 month. You could defer it. Just let it sit in the company account. It would give me the breathing room I need to cover the payroll for the workers. I don't want the guys, their families, to suffer. Just because of some client's mistake. It was a brilliant move. He was painting himself as the responsible leader, protecting the little guy, the laborers, the hundreds of men I'd employed for decades. He knew that would get to me. And for a second, it did. My first instinct was pride. My son taking charge, making the tough calls, protecting his people. Of course, son, I said, putting my mug down. If it's for the crew, don't give it a second thought. Defer the payment. It's no problem at all. The relief that washed over his face was immediate and overwhelming. It was like I'd just pulled him back from a ledge. Oh, Dad, thank you. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. I promise I'll make it up to you next month with interest. Don't worry about it, I said, waving him off. Just learn from this, son. Don't let clients walk all over you. I will, Dad. I promise. You're the best. He grabbed his briefcase from the floor and almost ran out the door, suddenly energized, his stress gone. Gotta get to the office, thanks again. I watched him go. I sat alone at the kitchen table, feeling that swell of paternal pride. And then, the cold logic crept in, like ice water dripping down my spine. Wait a minute. The company is so broke it can't pay my pension. So broke that a 35-day late payment threatens to shut down payroll for a $300 million corporation. But they had $75,000 for a BK Designs. They had $180,000 for an Audi R8. They had $95,000 for an heirloom watch that was 6 months old. That is $350,000 in cash. Spent on luxury items in the last 3 months. If the company was that tight on cash, why wouldn't he use that money? Why wouldn't he return the car? Why wouldn't he cancel the expensive planner? The two stories didn't just disagree. They were at war with each other. One of them was a lie. And the man who just walked out that door was not protecting his workers. He was lying to me. He wasn't short on cash. He was hiding it. He wasn't asking me to defer my pension to save the company. He was asking me to defer it so he could keep stealing from me. The coffee in my mug was suddenly bitter. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't let it go. The pride I felt for my son had curdled into something cold and heavy like dread. The numbers didn't add up. $350,000 in luxury spending versus a company supposedly too broke to pay its founder's pension. I sat at that kitchen table for an hour, just staring at the wall, replaying every conversation. The wedding planner, the R8, the heirloom watch, the cash flow problem. It was all a script, a sloppy, arrogant script. I decided I wouldn't be a clueless old man. I would ask him, directly. I waited until that evening. Brooke was upstairs, supposedly taking a long bath, the sound of the jets in the master tub humming through the house. Dylan was in the den, the large room Sarah and I built, watching a baseball game on the 80-inch television he'd installed last month. Another expense I hadn't questioned at the time. I walked in. I stood directly between him and the screen. Dad, what the hell? I'm watching the game. Turn it off, Dylan. My voice must have had a quality he wasn't used to, a coldness, a hardness. He fumbled for the remote, and the screen went black. The silence in the room was heavy. What's wrong? He asked, his tone wary, not concerned. I'm worried, son. I kept my voice level. I'm worried about the numbers. The numbers? What numbers? Dad, I told you the O'Malley payment is just late. Not those numbers. I cut him off. I'm talking about your numbers. You told me this morning that Carter Construction is so broke it can't cover payroll, that you needed my pension just to keep the lights on. It was to pay the crew, Dad, not the lights. And yet, I pressed on, you and Brooke have somehow spent $350,000 on personal luxuries in the last 3 months. A $75,000 wedding planner, a $180,000 car, a $95,000 watch. How do you square those two things, Dylan? How is the company facing bankruptcy, but your personal life is exploding with wealth? I expected him to look guilty. I expected him to stammer, to make excuses. I did not expect the rage. He shot up from the couch. His face went dark, a deep, angry red. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the large room. "Are you seriously accusing me of something? I'm just asking how—" "No, you're not asking. You're accusing. After everything I'm doing for you. We moved into this house, Dad. We put our lives on hold to take care of you, and this is the thanks I get, you spying on my spending." "I'm not spying, Dylan. I'm just—" "You're what? You're confused," he yelled, jabbing a finger at me. "That's what you are. You're mixing everything up, I told you. The wedding is being paid for by Brooks' family. The car was a gift from Brooks' family. The watch was an heirloom. What part of it's not my money do you not understand?" He stepped closer to me, and for the first time I felt physically intimidated by my own son. "You know what your problem is, Dad? You're grieving, and it's making you paranoid. You're sitting around this empty house counting pennies and making up crazy conspiracy theories because you don't understand how modern finance works." "Modern finance?" I said, shocked. "I built this company." "You built it in the 70s, Dad," he snapped. "Things are different now. We use leverage, we move assets, it's complicated. It's not something you can track on a paper statement. Brooke has a degree in this, she's brilliant, and she's trying to help optimize our family's portfolio, and you're treating her like a criminal." His words hit their mark. I felt a sudden, profound wave of doubt. Was he right? Was I just an old man, lost in my grief, unable to understand the new world? Had I just accused my son and his fiancée of terrible things based on my own confused paranoia? I looked at his angry, hurt face. He looked genuinely offended. I deflated. The anger I had felt was replaced by shame. I'm sorry, son," I stammered. I didn't mean to accuse. I'm so worried. About everything. Since your mother—" Dylan's expression softened instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by that practiced, patient sigh. He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders. "I know, Dad. I know. It's okay. We're all stressed." He guided me to the chair and gently pushed me down. "Look, you don't need to worry about this. Not the company, not the wedding, not any of it. That's my job now. Your job is to rest. Your job is to heal. Brooke and we're just modernizing the books. That's all. Can you just trust me? Can you trust us?" I looked at his earnest face. I felt so old, so tired, so irrelevant. "Yes, son," I whispered. I'm sorry. I'm just worried." "It's okay, Dad," he said. He gave my shoulder a squeeze. "It's all going to be fine. You'll see." But the squeeze was too hard. His fingers dug into my muscle just for a second. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of control. A warning. He smiled at me, but his eyes were cold. Utterly, terrifyingly cold. He turned back to the television, picked up the remote, and the game blared back to life, filling the silence. I just sat there, invisible again, my blood frozen in my veins. I knew in that moment that I had not been wrong. I had been gaslit, and I knew I was in terrible danger. I spent the next 2 days hiding. I stayed in my wing of the house in Sarah's old study, feeling the sting of Dylan's words. "You're confused. You don't understand modern finance. You're grieving." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an old fool, a dinosaur getting in the way of the new world. I felt ashamed of my suspicion, ashamed of the man I was becoming. I resolved to stay out of their way, to just trust them, to let go just like he'd asked. On Wednesday afternoon, Dylan and Brooke were out. At a cake tasting, Brooke had chirped as if nothing had happened. I retrieved the mail from the box at the end of our long drive just to feel useful, just to do something. It was the usual stack: junk mail, a few lingering sympathy cards, magazines I would never read, and one crisp, heavy, cream-colored envelope. It had the American Express logo in the top left corner, the corporate platinum card. My hands went cold. This was the main company account. I almost tossed it onto the dark mahogany table by the door of the pile for Dylan to handle. He was handling everything right. He was the financial expert. I was just the confused old man. But 45 years of habit are hard to break. Sarah and I always opened the Amex bill together. It was our monthly ritual, our scorecard. She'd read the charges and I'd grumble about the cost of fuel. My thumb slid under the flap. The first thing I saw was the red ink. A bright, angry red box at the top of the statement. Past due. I stopped breathing. Past due. In 45 years of marriage, in 40 years of running Carter Construction, Sarah and I had never been late on a payment. Not once. Our credit rating was our bond. It was sacred. It was the foundation of our reputation. A late payment wasn't just an oversight. It was a sign of decay, of sloppiness. Dylan had promised me. He swore he was paying the bills. He said I didn't need to worry. My hand was shaking not with grief, but with something new, a sharp electric anger. I looked past the red box at the minimum payment due, and then at the total balance. $86,450 for 1 month. I unfolded the statement to see the itemized charges, my blood turning to ice as I read down the list. Charge 1. Annual membership fee Oakwood Country Club, $20,000. $20,000. That was Dylan's club, the one I paid the $250,000 initiation fee for. He was now charging his annual dues to the company. Charge 2. Travel and entertainment, Four Seasons, Resort St. Bart's, $35,000. St. Bart's, St. Bart's. My mind raced. We build municipal bridges and office parks in the Midwest. We don't have clients in the Caribbean. I knew exactly what that was. That was their engagement trip 3 weeks ago. The trip they'd told me with sweet smiling faces that Brooke's parents had paid for. Another lie. Charge 3. Client dinner Le Ciel, $8,000. $8,000 for one meal. I recognized the name. It was that new impossible-to-get-into French restaurant Brooke was always reading about in magazines. The one with the celebrity chef. I kept reading. Gucci, Balenciaga, a $5,000 charge at a store called Tech Innovations that I knew was a high-end home theater installer. The new 80-inch TV in the den. And then it hit me. The cash flow problem. The deferred pension. He had looked me in the eye, his face a mask of responsible leadership, and told me the company was too broke to pay my pension. He'd asked me to make a sacrifice to pay the crew, not because the clients were late, but because he had spent $35,000 on a vacation to St. Bart's and charged it to the company. He didn't just lie to me. He stole from me, and then he asked me to give up my own money to cover the theft. The shame I'd felt after he gaslit me, it evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, pure, clarifying rage. This wasn't modern finance. This wasn't optimizing. This wasn't grief-induced paranoia. This was theft. Blatant, arrogant, high-level theft. He was treating my life's work, Sarah's legacy, as his personal piggy bank. My trust didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. The clueless old man just woke up, and he was furious. I didn't confront them. The rage was so cold, so clear, that it brought a strange kind of calm. My hands, which had been shaking, were now perfectly steady. I carefully folded the Amex statement and put it in my pocket. I walked out of the kitchen, past the den where the baseball game was still blaring, and went down the hall. At the end of the hall, past the laundry room, is a heavy oak door. It leads to my workshop, my sanctuary. It's the one place in this house that is still truly mine. It smells of cedar machine oil and old leather. Dylan and Brooke never come in here. They find it dusty. They call it my junk room. I walked in and locked the deadbolt behind me. The sound of the bolt sliding home felt final. I was safe here. I was away from them. I sat on my workbench surrounded by the tools I'd used my whole life. My old chisels, the lathe Sarah bought me for my 50th birthday, blueprints for projects I'd built 20 years ago. This was a room of truth, a room of hard work. And I had just walked out of a house full of lies. I pulled out my old flip phone. Not the smartphone Dylan had tried to give me, the one Brooke set up for me. This was my phone, the one with numbers I trusted. I scrolled down the contact list, past Emily, past Frank, until I found the name I was looking for. George Robinson, 72 years old. He was the first man I ever hired 45 years ago. He started as my bookkeeper working on a card table in a trailer, and he retired as the chief financial officer of Carter Construction. George and I built this company. He knows where every single penny is buried because he's the one who buried them. He is the only man on earth I trust as much as I trusted Sarah. I pressed the call button. My heart was hammering. What if he didn't answer? What if Dylan had somehow... Ben. His voice, gravelly and familiar, came through the line. I almost wept with relief. George, I said, and my own voice sounded strange, like a ghost. It's Ben. I need your help. There was a long pause on the other end. Not a confused pause. A heavy one. Ben, he said again, and his voice was suddenly sharp alert. Thank God you called. I've been ringing your house line for a month. I even tried your cell. It just goes to some new voicemail I don't recognize. What do you mean? I asked, my blood running cold. I haven't gotten any calls. I know, George said grimly. I finally got Dylan on his personal cell last week. He told me you were not taking calls, that you were deep in your grief and that I was disturbing your process by asking about work. Disturbing my process. The casual, therapeutic cruelty of it. He was isolating me. George, what's wrong? What did you want to talk about? What's wrong? George said, his voice dropping, is that I can't get into my own system. I tried to log in Ben, just to check the quarterly reports, old habits, you know. And my credentials, they've been revoked. I gripped the edge of the workbench. Revoked. Locked out. All of them. My administrator access. My oversight passwords. Everything. Wiped clean. I called Dylan furious. I asked him what the hell was going on. Who had the authority to lock me out? What did he say? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. He said Brooke was handling it. He said she was installing a new streamlined accounting software. That all the old systems were being sunsetted. He said it was just a technical glitch. He promised he'd have her call me to restore my access. And did she? George let out a short, bitter laugh. What do you think, Ben? That was 3 weeks ago, not a word. Ben, I don't like this. I don't like it one bit. That system is our fortress. I built it with paranoid-level security. You don't just sunset it for some new software without a 6-month transition plan. Not unless you're trying to hide something. His words were a life raft. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't a confused old man. I was right. George, I said, my voice steady now. You were right to be worried. It's bad. It's worse than you think. I told him everything. The Amex bill, St. Bart's, the $8,000 dinner, the cash flow problem, the deferred pension. For a full minute, the only sound on the line was George's heavy, angry breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was pure ice. That ungrateful little bastard. He's bleeding you dry, Ben. He's bleeding the company dry. I know, I said, but he locked you out. He locked me out. He said he's installing new software. How can we see what he's doing? How can we prove it? George was silent for another 10 seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in his brilliant 72-year-old mind. He thinks I'm an old dinosaur just like you, George finally said. He thinks I don't understand modern finance. He thinks he can just flip a switch and I'm gone. Can he? I asked, my hopes sinking. He can lock the front door, Ben, George said. His voice suddenly had a smile in it. A cold, dangerous smile. But he forgot about the back door. A back door? I always have a back door. I built a diagnostic portal into the main server that bypasses the user interface. It's hard-coded. He can't delete it unless he physically destroys the server. And that kid, he's arrogant, but he's not that smart. I stood up from the workbench, my entire body buzzing with adrenaline. Can you get in, George? Can you see what they're really doing? Give me 24 hours, George said. And Ben, don't say a word. Don't let them see you're suspicious. Go back to being the grieving, clueless old man. Let them think they're winning. I put my flip phone back in my pocket and sat there on the workbench for a long time, the smell of cedar and oil calming my nerves. George was right. I had to play the part. I had to be the broken, confused, grieving old man they already believed me to be. If I gave them any reason to think I was suspicious, they would lock down whatever back door George was trying to use. They would cover their tracks. I needed to give George time, and I needed to get out of this house. I couldn't stand being under the same roof with them, accepting their fake sympathy for one more night. I took a deep breath, unlocked the workshop door, and walked back into the house. I found them in the living room, huddled over a laptop. They looked up when I entered, their faces instantly arranging into masks of mild concern. Ben, you okay? Brooke asked. You were in there for a long time. I put on my best performance. I let my shoulders slump. I rubbed my face like a man exhausted by the world. I sighed heavily. I'm not okay, kids, I said, my voice intentionally weak. Dylan and Brooke exchanged a quick, subtle glance. It was a look I hadn't seen before, but I recognized it now, a look of partners, not of family. What's wrong, Dad? Dylan asked, getting up from the couch. I can't do this, I said, waving a hand around the room. This house, it's too much, Sarah. Every corner, every room, I'm suffocating. I let my voice crack just a little. Brooke was on her feet instantly, her face a perfect picture of sympathetic understanding. Oh, Ben, you poor thing. Of course it is. We understand, don't we, Dylan? Absolutely, Dylan said, moving toward me. What do you need, Dad? We can go to a hotel. We can redecorate. No, I said, shaking my head. That's not it. I need to get away. I need air. I've been thinking. You know the old cabin in Montana? Their reaction was electric. It wasn't just agreement. It was relief. A visible wave of it passed over both of them. Brooke's eyes lit up, and Dylan's shoulders, which had been tense, visibly relaxed. The cabin, Brooke said, her voice suddenly 2 octaves higher. Ben, that is a wonderful idea. The fresh air, the mountains, oh, that's perfect. I was thinking, I need to go fishing, I continued, building the lie. I need to just sit by the river, be alone. I need to get my head straight before this wedding. I feel like I'm losing my mind here. You're not losing your mind, Brooke cooed, patting my arm. You're grieving, and you should absolutely go. You should go tomorrow. She was practically pushing me out the door already. We can handle everything here. Don't you worry about a single thing. I'd be gone for a while, I said, testing them. Maybe 2 weeks, right up until the wedding. Take 3 weeks, Dylan said, his voice a little too eager. Take all the time you need, Dad. We've got the company, we've got the house. It's all under control. Right, Brooke? Completely under control, she beamed. I looked at Dylan. I was thinking, I'd probably turn my phone off. You know, just disconnect. The reception up there is terrible anyway. You probably wouldn't be able to reach me. Dylan's face, which had been carefully neutral, broke into a barely concealed smile. He tried to hide it by coughing, but I saw it. Oh yeah, he said, nodding. Terrible reception up there. Practically non-existent. That's probably for the best. You just focus on yourself, Dad. Total peace and quiet. He looked at Brooke and his eyes were shining. Wonderful, he muttered almost to himself. Well, okay then, I said, playing the part of the frail old man making a difficult decision. I guess I'll go pack a bag. We'll help you, Brooke chirped, already moving toward my bedroom. The next morning, my fishing gear and a large duffel bag were by the front door. They were both up early to see me off, which was a first. They were buzzing with a manic, happy energy. Brooke handed me a thermos. I made you coffee for the drive, Ben. Dylan carried my bag to the truck. You're sure you have everything? Warm socks. It gets cold up there. I'll be fine, son, I said. They both hugged me. Brooke's hug was quick and brittle. Have a wonderful, restful trip, Ben, she whispered. You deserve it. We'll see you at the wedding. Dylan's hug was stronger. A firm, dismissive pat on the back. Drive safe, Dad. And don't worry about us. We'll handle everything. Everything will be perfect when you get back. I got into my truck and started the engine. I looked at them one last time. They stood in the doorway of the house I built, the house Sarah and I shared for 45 years. They were waving their smiles as wide and bright as the morning sun. And as I pulled out of the long driveway, watching them in my rearview mirror, their smiles never wavered. They looked like two predators who had just successfully chased the old lion off his own territory. The coldness in my chest was so profound, I almost had to pull over. They weren't just relieved. They were celebrating. They thought they were free. They thought the clueless old man was finally out of their hair. I drove for 20 minutes heading west on the I-90, the highway that would eventually lead toward Montana. I even paid the toll just in case they were tracking my car, though that was probably just my own paranoia. At the next exit, I looped back around and headed downtown. I didn't go to my club. I didn't go to a fancy hotel where someone might recognize me. I drove to a residence inn on a bland street in the West Loop, a place filled with traveling salesmen and families visiting the nearby medical district. It was anonymous. It was perfect. The room smelled like stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. It was a world away from my sprawling, empty house, but for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe. I paid for 2 weeks in cash. The young woman at the desk didn't blink an eye. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked down the long beige hallway to room 418. I knocked twice, then once, then twice again. The signal George and I had agreed on. The door opened instantly. George Robinson stood there, his white hair a mess, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were sharp. Ben, he grunted. You made it. I stepped inside. The room was chaos. The hotel desk and the small dining table had been pushed together. George had set up 2 large curved monitors, a laptop, and what looked like a portable server. Wires snaked across the floor. Empty coffee cups and energy bar wrappers littered the surfaces. It was a war room. You've been busy, I said, dropping my duffel bag by the door. He was busy first, George said, not taking his eyes off a screen full of code. All right, Ben, let's start digging. He sat down, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was sloppy. He locked me out of the main interface, but he left the diagnostic port wide open. He probably doesn't even know it exists. I watched over his shoulder. I didn't understand the lines of green text scrolling past, but I understood the growing anger on George's face. "My God," George whispered after 10 minutes of furious typing. He pointed to a directory. "Look at this. He hasn't just been moving money, Ben. He's been changing ownership structures. He's been creating new LLCs, shell companies, and transferring assets." "What kind of assets?" "Small stuff at first. Equipment, trucks. He's listing them as sold for scrap and then transferring the titles to this new company, Apex Development." Apex. The name Brooke had whispered into the phone in the garden. My heart hammered. "I've heard that name, George." George looked at me sharply. "How?" "I heard Brooke on the phone. She said move the money through Apex." George's face went grim. "So she's not just the new accountant. She's the co-conspirator." He typed again, pulling up another set of files. "Okay, so Apex is the drain. But where is the money coming from? He can't just write checks from Carter to Apex, that's too obvious." "The wedding," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "The $75,000 wedding planner. Brooke said her name was Beverly K. BK Designs." George's fingers became a blur. BK Designs. BK Designs. Nothing in our vendor database. Nothing in the state registry. "Let's try Delaware." He went silent. The screen flashed. A document appeared. "Got it," he said, his voice a low growl. "BK Designs LLC, incorporated 4 months ago, the same day Dylan moved into your house. Registered to a P.O. box in Wilmington, Delaware." He clicked another link. "Bank records, a single transfer in, $75,000, from your personal trust account, Ben, the one Dylan got access to." "So it's a shell company," I said, my voice hoarse. "There is no Beverly K." George scrolled down the document. "Oh, she exists, Ben. I'm looking at the incorporation papers. The list of officers." He stopped. He slowly turned in his chair to look at me, his face a mask of disbelief and pity. "What is it, George?" "Who is it?" "The sole beneficiary," George said, pointing to the screen. "The only person listed on the incorporation documents. The registered agent for BK Designs." He paused, then said the name that sealed the betrayal. "Ben, it's Brooke." I stared at the screen. Brooke. Her name. The sole beneficiary. My son's fiancée. The woman who smiled at me, who patted my hand, who told me I was a worrywart. 75,000. I whispered the words, feeling like sandpaper in my throat. She just took it." "No, Ben." George said, his voice quiet and terrible. He turned back to the keyboard, his fingers moving again. "She didn't just take it. This was the test. This was the first one. To see if you'd notice. When you didn't, when you believed her, they opened the floodgates." "What do you mean?" "I mean BK Designs was just the beginning. Look." He pointed to another screen. He had pulled up the main ledger from Carter Construction. "Now that I'm in through the back door, I can see the real books. Not the modernized ones she's been showing Dylan. I can see the wire transfers." He clicked his mouse. A new line item appeared. "Apex Development," he read out loud. "Registered to a post office box in Nevada. 3 wire transfers. One in April for 100,000, one in May for another 100,000, and one just last week for 300,000. $500,000, I whispered, doing the math in my head. My legs felt weak. I grabbed the back of the hotel chair. "No, Ben," George said. "That's just one of them. Look here." Another click, another company name. Carter Logistics, a shell company. He's smart, your boy. He gave it a name that looked like one of our actual subsidiaries. But it's not. This one was incorporated in the Cayman Islands, completely offshore. and it's been receiving steady payments of $50,000 a week for the last 4 months. 50,000 a week for 4 months. George, my God, what is that? $800,000, George said, his voice flat. And there's another one. Midwest Steel Sourcing, also Cayman, 600,000. And another. Brooke and Carter Holdings. The arrogance of that. Another 300,000. He kept clicking, line after line, company after company, each one a ghost, each one a drain siphoning the lifeblood out of my company, the one I built, the one I was going to give him. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I stumbled back and sat heavily on the edge of the hotel bed. The room was spinning. George, stop. Just stop. What is the total? What's the bottom line? George stopped typing. The room was silent, except for the hum of the portable server and the sound of my own ragged breathing. He swiveled in his chair, his face pale, his eyes filled with a rage that mirrored my own. They've been at this for 6 months, Ben. Since the day Sarah died, since the day you signed those papers. He gestured to his screens. They're running a classic bust-out scheme. They are creating fake invoices from their own fake companies for services that were never rendered. Consulting fees, logistics management, sourcing commissions. And Dylan, with the power of attorney you gave him, has been approving every single one. The total, George. Just give me the total. George looked down at his notepad where he'd been running a tally. He put his glasses on as if to double-check the impossible number. In 6 months, he said, his voice cracking with fury, your son and his fiancée, they have stolen $2,425,000 from you. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. $2.4 million. My stomach heaved. I bent over, clutching my abdomen. I wasn't just sick. I was hollowed out. All the lies, the Audi, the watch, the cash flow problem, the deferred pension. It was all a game. A sick, cruel game to cover this. They weren't just spending lavishly. They were systematically, methodically, and criminally gutting my company. They were stealing my entire legacy piece by piece while patting me on the head and calling me a clueless old man. But why? I finally managed to get the words out. My voice was a rasp. Why so much? They were going to inherit it all anyway. Why steal it? Why do this? For what? I looked at George, desperate for an answer that made sense. George just looked at me, his face etched with a pity that was almost worse than the anger. He shook his head slowly. Ben, he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. I'm afraid it's worse than that. The stealing, the 2.4 million, that's not the real plan. What do you mean it's not the plan? I mean, George said, turning back to his screen, that's just their vacation money. The real plan is much, much worse. I found the loan agreements. Loan agreements? I repeated, my voice hollow. What loan agreements, George? We haven't taken a loan in 15 years. We own our buildings. We own our equipment. We pay cash. That's the Carter way. Sarah hated debt. I know, Ben. I know, George said, his face grim. He clicked his mouse and a new set of documents filled one of the monitors. They were official. They had bank logos on them. A bank I didn't recognize. First National Merchant Bank. Not our bank of 40 years. Look at this, Ben. He pointed to a file dated just 2 months ago. Application for a business line of credit. $10 million. I stared at the screen. I never authorized this. I've never even heard of First National Merchant Bank." "Of course you haven't," George said, his voice dripping with acid. "That's the point. He didn't go to our bank because they would have called you. They know you. They know us. He went to a new bank, an aggressive lender. And look here." He zoomed in on the last page of the application. There at the bottom was my signature. Benjamin Carter. But it wasn't my signature. It was cleaner. More perfect. A digital forgery. "I didn't sign this," I whispered, touching the screen. "George, that's not my signature." "No," George said. "It's not. But it's legally binding, because he attached this to it." He clicked again. A new document appeared. It was the stack of papers I had signed in Sarah's office in my fog of grief and medication. And there at the top was the title I had been too blind to read. Durable General and Financial Power of Attorney. "My God," I choked out. He told me it was for the utility bills. He said it was temporary access." George scrolled down the legal text. "Ben, this isn't temporary. This is durable. It's ironclad. It gives him the complete and total authority to act as you, to buy, to sell, to borrow, to do anything he wants with your assets, your personal assets, the company's assets, everything. You didn't just give him the keys to the cash register, Ben. You gave him the keys to the entire goddamn kingdom." I felt the room tilt. The memory of that moment. His patient voice. "It's just standard, Dad. It's what families do." I had been played. I had been so utterly, completely fooled by my own son in my weakest moment. So he used this paper to get a loan. He used this paper to guarantee the loan. George corrected me, his tone sharp. He didn't just sign as Dylan Carter, power of attorney for Benjamin Carter. That might have raised red flags. No, he was smarter than that. He just forged your name, and he kept this POA document on file as the legal justification for his signature in case anyone questioned it. But no one did. Why would they? They saw a $10 million application personally guaranteed by a man with a net worth of $300 million. The bank didn't even blink. They approved it in 48 hours. I couldn't process the scale of it. $10 million. Where did it go? What did he do with it? George's face got even darker. He looked like a man who was about to deliver a death sentence. "Ben, that was just the first one." "The first," he clicked again. "Apex Development, $5 million loan, approved last month." Another click. "Carter Logistics, a $10 million line of credit, approved 2 weeks ago." My God, George, that's $25 million. What is he doing? Is he buying property? Is he expanding? "No, Ben," George said. He pointed to the transfer records. "He's not using the money. He's just moving it. The $10 million from First National. It was wired directly to Carter Logistics in the Caymans. The $5 million for Apex wired to an account in Switzerland. He stole $25 million. No." George slammed his hand on the desk, making the monitors wobble. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. This isn't about the money. This is about the debt. He's not just stealing, Ben. He's doing something else. He's taken out $25 million in your name, secured by your assets. He's moved the cash offshore where we can't touch it. But the debt is still here. It's attached to Carter Construction. It's attached to your house. It's attached to you." I stared at him, my mind a complete blank. I couldn't understand the endgame. "But he has to pay it back, right? The banks. They'll come for him." "No, Ben," George said, his voice barely a whisper. "They won't come for him. They'll come for the person who signed the papers. They'll come for the man who guaranteed the loans. He pointed a shaking finger at me. They'll come for you. But what did he tell the bank? What was all this money for? Loan agreements. I repeated, my voice hollow. What loan agreements, George? We haven't taken a loan in 15 years. We own our buildings, we own our equipment. We pay cash. That's the Carter way. Sarah hated debt. I know, Ben, I know, George said, his face grim. He clicked his mouse and a new set of documents filled one of the monitors. They were official. They had bank logos on them. A bank I didn't recognize. First National Merchant Bank. Not our bank of 40 years. Look at this, Ben. He pointed to a file dated just 2 months ago. Application for a business line of credit. $10 million. I stared at the screen. I never authorized this. I've never even heard of First National Merchant Bank. Of course you haven't, George said, his voice dripping with acid. That's the point. He didn't go to our bank because they would have called you. They know you, they know us. He went to a new bank, an aggressive lender. And look here. He zoomed in on the last page of the application. There at the bottom was my signature. Benjamin Carter. But it wasn't my signature. It was cleaner. More perfect. A digital forgery. I didn't sign this, I whispered, touching the screen. George, that's not my signature. No, George said. It's not, but it's legally binding, because he attached this to it. He clicked again. A new document appeared. It was the stack of papers I had signed in Sarah's office in my fog of grief and medication. And there at the top was the title I had been too blind to read. Durable General and Financial Power of Attorney. My God, I choked out. He told me it was for the utility bills. He said it was temporary access. George scrolled down the legal text. Ben, this isn't temporary. This is durable. It's ironclad. It gives him the complete and total authority to act as you, to buy, to sell, to borrow, to do anything he wants with your assets, your personal assets, the company's assets, everything. You didn't just give him the keys to the cash register, Ben. You gave him the keys to the entire goddamn kingdom. I felt the room tilt. The memory of that moment. His patient voice. It's just standard, Dad. It's what families do. I had been played. I had been so utterly, completely fooled by my own son in my weakest moment. So he used this paper to get a loan. He used this paper to guarantee the loan. George corrected me, his tone sharp. He didn't just sign as Dylan Carter, power of attorney for Benjamin Carter. That might have raised red flags. No, he was smarter than that. He just forged your name, and he kept this POA document on file as the legal justification for his signature in case anyone questioned it. But no one did. Why would they? They saw a $10 million application personally guaranteed by a man with a net worth of $300 million. The bank didn't even blink. They approved it in 48 hours. I couldn't process the scale of it. $10 million. Where did it go? What did he do with it? George's face got even darker. He looked like a man who was about to deliver a death sentence. Ben, that was just the first one. The first? He clicked again. Apex Development, a $5 million loan, approved last month. Another click. Carter Logistics, a $10 million line of credit, approved 2 weeks ago. My God, George, that's $25 million. What is he doing? Is he buying property? Is he expanding? No, Ben, George said. He pointed to the transfer records. He's not using the money. He's just moving it. The $10 million from First National. It was wired directly to Carter Logistics in the Caymans. The $5 million for Apex wired to an account in Switzerland. He stole $25 million. No. George slammed his hand on the desk, making the monitors wobble. That's what I'm trying to tell you. This isn't about the money. This is about the debt. He's not just stealing, Ben. He's doing something else. He's taken out $25 million in your name secured by your assets. He's moved the cash offshore where we can't touch it. But the debt is still here. It's attached to Carter Construction. It's attached to your house. It's attached to you. I stared at him, my mind a complete blank. I couldn't understand the endgame. But he has to pay it back, right? The banks, they'll come for him. No, Ben, George said, his voice barely a whisper. They won't come for him. They'll come for the person who signed the papers. They'll come for the man who guaranteed the loans. He pointed a shaking finger at me. They'll come for you. But what did he tell the bank? What was all this money for? What was it for, George? I asked again, my voice sounding distant. $25 million. What was the lie? George clicked on the loan applications one by one. High-risk short-term investments. He read, his voice dripping with contempt. International commodities. Currency speculation. All garbage. All lies. These were unsecured loans, Ben. They wouldn't be worth the paper they were printed on except for one thing. My guarantee, I said, the words tasting like poison. Your entire empire, George corrected me. Your $300 million empire as collateral. No bank in the world would turn that down. It's the safest bet they could possibly make. I shook my head, my mind still thick. I still don't get it, George. This is insane. He takes out $25 million. He wires it offshore. But he owes it. The banks will find him. They'll freeze his accounts. They'll bring him back. He can't just disappear with $25 million. George swiveled in his chair, his face pale, his eyes burning with a terrible, pitying fire. Ben, he said, his voice soft. Stop. Think. You're still thinking like a businessman. You're not thinking like a criminal. What do you mean Ben, he doesn't care about the $25 million. He's not trying to keep the $25 million. That money is already gone, washed through a dozen accounts. It's the price of admission. For what? George took a deep, shuddering breath. They're not just stealing from you, Ben. They're annihilating you. They're erasing you. I just stared at him, not understanding. Here's the plan, George said, standing up and starting to pace the small hotel room, his agitation too much to contain. Here's what your son, your flesh and blood, has planned for you. He pointed to the screen showing the $2.4 million in stolen invoice payments. Step 1, skim. This is their walking around money. The $2.4 million. That's their cash. That's the money they plan to live on. The Audi, the watch, the $75,000 wedding planner that is just her. That's all part of this. This is the nest egg. He pointed to the other screen, the one with the $25 million in fraudulent loans. Step 2, the time bomb. These loans, they're not due for another 30 days, right after the wedding. He stopped pacing and looked at me. Do you see it, Ben? I shook my head, my mind still refusing to make the final terrible leap. They aren't going to be here when those loans default, George said, his voice a low growl. They're going to be on a beach in some country with no extradition treaty, drinking champagne. They're going to take their $2.4 million in cash, and they're going to disappear after the wedding. And the loans, I whispered. The loans default, George said, throwing his hands up. The bank's First National Merchant and the others. They won't be able to find Dylan. They won't be able to find the offshore cash. So who will they come for, Ben? The room went silent. I finally understood. They'll come for the guarantor, I said, my voice dead. They'll come for you, George confirmed, his voice breaking. They will seize the collateral. And what is the collateral? It's Carter Construction. It's your home. It's your personal stock portfolio. It's everything, Ben. They will take everything. They will liquidate your entire life's work to cover a $25 million debt that your son created just to hide the theft of $2.4 million. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just theft. It wasn't just greed. It was a murder, a financial execution. He's leaving me with nothing, I said, the words falling from my lips. He's leaving me, 70 years old, bankrupt, and holding the bag for $25 million in fraudulent loans. Worse, George said. You'll be legally implicated. The banks, the feds, they'll think you were in on it. They'll think you were the mastermind. You'll be ruined, Ben, financially and legally. You'll lose your company, you'll lose your house, and you'll probably lose your freedom. I saw it all in one blinding, horrifying flash. The for sale sign on my home, the gates of Carter Construction padlocked by federal marshals. My name, the name Sarah and I had built, dragged through the mud. And me, sitting in a courtroom trying to explain that my own son had done this to me. And them. Dylan and Brooke, laughing on a beach, living off their stolen $2.4 million, their escape funded by the total destruction of my life. I thought of his face, his solicitous, concerned face. Dad, you just rest. We'll handle everything. Brooke's brilliant with finance. I thought of her whisper in the garden. He knows nothing. A grieving, clueless old man. A cold, pure, and perfect rage rose in my chest. It burned away the grief. It burned away the confusion. It burned away the old, weak man I had been for the last 6 months. They thought I was a dinosaur. They thought I was a confused, forgetful, clueless old man who was too lost in his grief to see what was happening right under his nose. They thought they could sign away my life, burn down my legacy, and leave me to rot in the ashes. I stood up from the bed. My legs were steady. My hands were no longer shaking. George, I said, and my voice was no longer the voice of a victim. It was the voice of the man who built Carter Construction. Get me everything, every file, every transfer, every forged signature. I want it all. Because if they think this is how my story ends, they are so wrong. I left George's hotel room. I went back to my own down the hall. I needed to make this next call alone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap comforter rough against my hands. My first instinct was to call Avery, my corporate attorney, to get the legal machine rolling. But I didn't. There was one person who deserved to hear this first. One person who was part of this family, who had also lost Sarah, who was also being betrayed, even if she didn't know it yet. My daughter Emily. I scrolled through my old flip phone and found her name. My hand hovered over the button. This was the hardest call, telling her what her brother had become. It felt like a final failure. It felt like I was poisoning her too. But I knew Emily. She was strong. She was Sarah's daughter through and through. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. Dad? Her voice was clear, professional. She was probably at her office. Is everything okay? I thought you were in Montana. The lie. The trap. It was my turn to lie. No. I said, my voice thick and low. I'm not in Montana. I'm in Chicago. I need you to come home, Emily. A pause. The line crackled. Home, Dad, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Is it Dylan? I need you to fly to Chicago, right now, today. And Emily, I took a deep breath. You cannot under any circumstances tell your brother you are coming. Do you understand me? He cannot know you're here. I expected a flood of questions. Why? What happened? What's going on? Instead, there was a long, cold, terrifying silence on the other end of the line. A silence that lasted 5 full seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was different. It wasn't my daughter, the corporate lawyer. It was someone else. The warmth was gone. It was flat cold and razor sharp. "Dad," she said, and her voice was so controlled, it chilled me. "I've been waiting for this call for 3 weeks. What are you talking about? I've known something was wrong since that Sunday dinner." She said her words quick and precise like an attorney laying out a case. "The heirloom watch, the $95,000 watch that was 6 months old. That's not a mistake, Dad. That's a tell." I was speechless. "Emily, So I did what I do, Dad. I started digging. Dylan and Brooke had made a terrible mistake. They saw Emily as I had, as a quiet, successful lawyer in a different city. They dismissed her. They probably thought she was just some low-level attorney pushing papers for a real estate firm. They forgot. Or maybe in their arrogance they never even bothered to find out. My daughter, Emily Carter, is not a corporate lawyer. She's an assistant district attorney for Cook County. She's been in the economic crimes unit for 10 years. She doesn't just sue people, Dad. She puts them in prison. She hunts men like Dylan for a living. I checked the public records, Dad. She continued, her voice like ice. The day after that dinner, I saw the new mortgage filings from First National Merchant Bank. I saw the UCC liens stacking up against Carter Construction's assets. I saw a durable power of attorney filed with the county registrar, dated 3 days after Mom's funeral with your name on it. I've been running background on Apex Development and BK Designs on my own time. They're textbook shell corporations. They're ghosts." I couldn't speak. She knew. She had seen it all from a distance, just from a single stupid lie about a watch. "My God, Emily," I finally choked out. "You knew." "I suspected," she said, her voice softening just a fraction. "I didn't know why. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know about the $2.4 million George just found, but I knew it was a setup. I was waiting for you to see it, Dad. I couldn't move until you were out of that house and safe, until you were ready." "I'm ready," I said. "I know. Now listen to me." The professional voice was back. "I'm packing my bag right now. I'm in a cab on the way to O'Hare. I will be on the next flight. I'll be in Chicago in 3 hours. What's your location?" "The Residence Inn, West Loop." "Good. Don't leave, don't call them, don't answer your phone if they call you. Don't do anything. George has the digital evidence. I need the physical evidence, the Amex bill, the original POA you signed. Do you have it?" "No," I said. "He took it, the blue folder." "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice tight with anger. "A copy is filed with the bank. I'll get it. Dad, listen. This isn't a family problem anymore. This isn't a dispute. This is a multi-million-dollar multi-state wire and bank fraud case. This is a federal crime." I hung up the phone. The rage I'd felt was still there, a burning coal in my stomach. But it was joined by something else now. A cold, hard, terrible hope. The clueless old man had just declared war. But he wasn't fighting alone. He had just called in the cavalry. And the cavalry was his daughter. Emily arrived 3 hours later. She didn't look like my daughter. She looked like a prosecutor. She wore a sharp navy pantsuit, her hair pulled back so tight it looked severe. She wasn't carrying luggage, just a heavy leather briefcase. She gave me a hug, but it was fast, hard, and all business. "Okay, Dad. Let's get to work." George was already there, his 2 monitors glowing in the dim hotel room. An hour later, Ms. Avery, my personal attorney for 30 years, knocked on the door. She was a small, sharp woman in her 50s who had handled Sarah's will. She looked stunned, confused. I had called her on Emily's recommendation, simply stating, "There's a financial emergency regarding the company. You need to be here." The four of us sat around the small hotel table. It felt surreal. George, my oldest friend, Ms. Avery, my trusted lawyer, Emily, my daughter, my new war room. George did the talking first. He laid out the digital trail he'd uncovered, the shell companies, BK Designs, Apex Development, the $2.4 million skimmed. Then he moved to the loans, the $25 million, the forged signatures, the durable power of attorney I had signed in my grief. As he spoke, Ms. Avery's face went from confused to pale to horrified. She was a civil attorney. She dealt with contracts and estates. This was something else entirely. "My God, Ben," she whispered when George finished. Her hands were trembling. This is catastrophic. We have to call the bank immediately. We have to file for an injunction. We need to freeze every asset. We need to file a civil suit. No." The word cut through Avery's panicked rambling. It came from Emily. Avery stopped, confused. "What do you mean, no, Emily?" "Emily, they're liquidating his estate. This is the most flagrant—" "Ms. Avery," Emily interrupted, and her voice was so cold, so devoid of emotion, it made even me flinch. "You're looking at this as a civil matter. You're wrong." She turned to me. Her eyes were like steel. "Dad, this isn't just theft. This isn't a family dispute over an inheritance. What Dylan and Brooke are doing is a federal crime. Multiple federal crimes." She started ticking them off on her fingers. "The shell companies incorporated in Delaware, with money wired to the Caymans. That's classic wire fraud. That's a 20-year mandatory minimum sentence. The loans, they forged your signature and used your assets as collateral to defraud a federally insured bank. That's bank fraud. Another 30 years. They used the mail to send that Amex bill trying to cover their tracks, mail fraud. They filed that fraudulent POA with the county registrar, document fraud." She looked at all of us. "They aren't just going to be sued. They are going to prison. For a very, very long time." Prison. The word hung in the air. This was my son. My son. I felt a wave of nausea, a deep primal pain that was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Miss Avery, to her credit, regrouped quickly. "She's right, Ben. This is beyond me. If this is a federal fraud case, our first move must be to cooperate. We have to notify the banks. We have to notify the FBI. We have to get ahead of this. If those loans default and we haven't reported it, you could be seen as a co-conspirator. You could be implicated in the whole thing." "She's right," I said, my voice hoarse. "We have to stop it." "When do the loans default?" Emily asked, turning to George. Her face was like stone. George checked his notes. "The first $10 million payment is due. My God. It's due in 10 days. 10 days. We had to move fast. "I'm calling the U.S. Attorney's office now," Avery said, her hand already on her phone. "We have to stop them before they leave the country." "Wait," Emily said. Avery froze her hand in the air. Emily looked at me, her face calm and terrifyingly still. "The wedding. Dad, when did you say the wedding was?" I looked at the cheap hotel calendar on the wall. The date was circled in my memory. The date I was supposed to return from Montana. "This Saturday," I said. 4 days from now." Avery looked completely baffled. "Emily, what in God's name does the wedding have to do with anything? We are looking at a $25 million financial time bomb." Emily didn't even look at her. She just stared at the blank wall, and a slow, cold, and absolutely calculating smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a hunter who had just seen the prey walk calmly into a perfect open trap. "Perfect," she whispered. "Perfect," George and Avery said in unison. "No," Emily said, her voice low. "We don't call anyone. Not yet." She turned her gaze to me, her eyes blazing with a righteous fury that took my breath away. "They're arrogant. They think you're a clueless old man. They think they're free and clear." She leaned forward. "So we let them. We let them have their perfect $100,000 party. We let them gather all their friends and wealthy connections in one room to celebrate their new life. We let them stand up in front of God and everyone and make their vows." She held my gaze. "And then, right when they're kissing the bride, then we send in the marshals." And so I stood there, back at the beginning, at the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood Country Club in my custom Tom Ford suit facing the two guards. The older one was holding the photograph of my face. "Mr. Dylan Carter was very specific," he said again, his voice flat. "If this old man shows up, throw him out." This time I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I didn't feel the shock or the humiliation I had felt in my memory of this moment. All I felt was a cold, still, perfect calm. I looked up at the balcony. There they were, Dylan and Brooke, my son and his bride-to-be, champagne flutes in hand. They were watching me. They wanted me to see them. They wanted to witness my final, pathetic defeat. Dylan's smile was a cruel slash across his face. He raised his glass in that mocking toast. Brooke threw her head back and laughed, that bright, tinkling laugh that now sounded like a siren. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was a confused, grieving old man who had crawled back from his fake fishing trip to beg for scraps at their table. They thought I was here to plead. I was not here to plead. I was here to watch. I simply nodded at the guard, as if accepting my fate. "I understand," I said quietly. I turned my back to the gates. I didn't get in my car. I just walked slowly across the manicured street onto the public sidewalk directly opposite the entrance. I stood under the shade of a large oak tree, perfectly visible. I could see Dylan's confusion from 100 yards away. This wasn't part of his plan. I was supposed to make a scene. I was supposed to yell, to cry, to beg. I was supposed to prove I was the weak, senile old man he needed me to be. Instead, I just stood there, waiting. He frowned. He said something to Brooke. She shrugged, dismissed me with a wave of her hand, and they both turned and walked back inside the clubhouse. The show was over for them. They had won. I leaned against the tree. I could hear the faint, elegant music of the string quartet starting up. Guests continued to stream past me, a river of expensive perfume and polite, averted glances. They saw me, the father of the groom, exiled to the sidewalk. They whispered. They judged. Let them. I checked my watch. The old Omega Seamaster Sarah had given me for our 20th anniversary. The one thing of value I'd made sure to wear. The hands showed 12:05 p.m. The wedding was scheduled to begin at noon. The processional would be starting any second. George was parked a block away in his car, acting as a lookout. Emily was at her office downtown, coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Avery was with the bank president, who was anxiously awaiting the signal to freeze every account. Everything was in place. Every move was choreographed. Emily, my brilliant, cold-eyed daughter, had timed this down to the minute. "Let them be at the altar, Dad," she'd said. "Let them be in front of everyone. Let them be at the absolute peak of their arrogance and success. That's when you hit them. Not a minute before." Through the gates, I could see the ceremony beginning on the great lawn. 150 guests were seated. The music swelled. I saw the bridesmaids in their pale yellow dresses begin their slow walk down the aisle. Then I saw Dylan. He was standing at the altar, his back straight, looking at his bride. Brooke appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white lace. She was beaming. She looked beautiful. She looked like a viper. She began her walk, step by step getting closer to the man she had conspired with to destroy me, closer to her new life built on fraud, theft, and the ruins of my own. The music was beautiful. The sun was shining. It was a perfect day. I watched as she reached the altar. I saw Dylan take her hand. I saw them turn to face the minister. I looked at my watch again. 12:15 p.m. The minister's voice was too faint to hear from where I stood, but I knew the words by heart. I'd said them to Sarah. To have and to hold, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. What a bitter joke. I felt my old flip phone vibrate in my pocket. A single short buzz. A text from Emily. Now. I stood by my tree, a silent, invisible spectator. I couldn't hear the minister's words from that distance, but I didn't need to. I knew the script by heart. I watched their body language. The minister was reading from his book. Dylan and Brooke were holding hands, gazing at each other with practiced adoration. The guests were a sea of pastel, all looking forward. I imagined the words I couldn't hear. To love and to cherish. I saw the minister pause. He looked up from his book first at Brooke, then at Dylan. This was it. The part where he asks the big question. The part where he offers one last chance for the truth. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be lawfully joined in matrimony, let him speak now, or forever hold his peace. I saw Dylan's confident smile. I saw Brooke's little smug tilt of her head. They were untouchable. They had won. And then right on cue, as if summoned by the minister's own words, the interruption came. It wasn't me. It was a black sedan. A Ford Taurus. It pulled up to the club's entrance, not with a siren, but with a silent, heavy authority. It parked directly in front of the gates, blocking the circular driveway. The two security guards who had thrown me out looked confused. They started to walk toward the car, their hands instinctively moving to their belts. Then a second car, a black SUV, pulled up right behind the first. The doors of the sedan opened. Two men in dark conservative suits stepped out. They wore small patriotic pins on their lapels. They walked with a purpose that was nothing like a wedding guest. The two security guards stepped forward. "Excuse me, sirs, this is a private event." The first agent didn't even slow down. He simply flipped open a leather wallet, showed them a badge, and said something I couldn't hear. The effect was instantaneous. The two big, tough guards who had treated me like dirt. They shrank. They turned pale. They stepped back, their hands raised as if to show they were no threat. The agents walked right past them. They were followed by two more men from the SUV. One was in a suit, carrying a heavy briefcase. The other was a woman in a severe pantsuit. I recognized her instantly from a photo Emily had shown me. An investigator from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They didn't stop to look at the decor. They didn't admire the flowers. They walked, all four of them, in a tight, determined group straight onto the great lawn. The violinist who had been playing some soft, romantic tune saw them first. Her bow skittered across the strings, producing a horrible screeching sound. The music died. In the sudden silence, every head in the crowd, all 150 of them, turned as one. A collective audible gasp rippled across the lawn. Dylan and Brooke at the altar were the last to notice. Dylan looked annoyed, turning his head, furious at the interruption. Brooke's smile froze on her face. The four agents didn't stop at the back of the crowd. They proceeded straight down the center aisle, their black shoes scuffing the pristine white runner. Their footsteps were the only sound in the sudden dead silence. They walked past the shocked faces of Brooke's parents in the front row. They walked past the empty chair where I was supposed to be sitting. They stopped directly in front of the altar, forming a semicircle around my son and his bride. The minister, a young man who looked terrified, clutched his Bible. I'm sorry," he stammered. "This is a private ceremony." The lead FBI agent, a tall, no-nonsense man, ignored him. He looked directly at my son. From across the street, I couldn't hear his words, but I didn't need to. I saw him speak. I saw Dylan's face, his annoyed expression, melt into pure, unadulterated shock. His mouth fell open. He started to yell something like, "What is this? This is my wedding." And then I saw Brooke. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just deflated. The color drained from her face, leaving her as white as her dress. Her shoulders slumped. She let go of Dylan's hand. She knew. In that one perfect frozen moment, she knew the game was over. She knew the clueless old man had somehow won. The silence on the lawn was absolute. It was heavier and more profound than the silence in Sarah's empty house. You could hear the click of the lead agent's Zippo lighter as he incredibly lit a cigarette, completely disrespecting the club's no-smoking policy. He took a long, slow drag. Dylan, who had been frozen for a full 10 seconds, finally found his voice. It was high-pitched, incredulous. What is this? Is this a joke? Is this part of the entertainment?" The guests looked at each other, confused. Brooke's mother, a woman named Eleanor, who I'd met briefly, started to stand up from the front row. "What is the meaning of this? You are ruining my daughter's wedding." The lead agent ignored her. He just looked at Dylan. "Dylan Carter." His voice was gravel. "Yes, I'm Dylan Carter. Now get the hell off this property. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" Oh, that was Rich. He was using my name as a shield, the name he was simultaneously trying to destroy. "We do, Mr. Carter," the agent said. He took the cigarette from his mouth. "And you are under arrest." He nodded to the IRS agent. "You too, ma'am." "Brooke, it's Brooke Carter." "Almost," she whispered, her hands starting to tremble. "No, ma'am," the IRS agent, a small, sharp-eyed woman, said. "Your name is Brooke Collins, and you are also under arrest." "For what?" Dylan shrieked, his face turning a blotchy, ugly red. "You can't just arrest us for what?" The lead agent unclipped a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The click, click, click of the metal ratchet was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. "Dylan Carter," the agent said, his voice booming across the silent lawn. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft." He nodded at the IRS agent, who produced her own set of cuffs. "Brooke Collins, you are under arrest for the same. Conspiracy wire fraud and multiple counts of money laundering." The crowd erupted. Phones came out. 150 tiny cameras all pointing at the altar. Brooke's mother let out a short, sharp scream. "This is a mistake," Dylan yelled, backing away, pulling Brooke with him. "You have no proof. Who told you this? Who told you these lies?" He looked desperately at the crowd, as if searching for an ally. "I did." The voice was calm, clear, and cold. It cut through Dylan's panicked shrieks like a surgeon's scalpel. The agents parted, and my daughter Emily stepped forward. She was in her dark navy prosecutor suit. Her hair was in a tight professional bun. She was holding a leather folder in one hand and her ADA badge in the other. Dylan stared at her. His brain simply could not process what he was seeing. What are you doing here, Dad's in Montana." "No, he's not," Emily said. She took a step closer, holding up her badge so he and Brooke and everyone in the front row could see it. "I'm here in my official capacity, Dylan. Assistant District Attorney Emily Carter, Cook County Economic Crimes Unit." She looked at the terrified minister. "And as an officer of the court, I object to this marriage." Dylan just broke. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the bluster. It just evaporated. He looked at Emily, then at the agents, then back at Emily. "You," he whispered. "You did this, your own brother. You forged our father's name," she said, her voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from her. "You stole from him. You conspired to ruin him. You planned to leave a 70-year-old man, our father, bankrupt and alone. Family doesn't do that, Dylan. So no, you are not my brother. You're just my case. No, he yelled, and he lunged. Not at Emily. At the agents. It was a stupid, pathetic, desperate move. The lead agent didn't even flinch. He sidestepped, grabbed Dylan's arm, spun him around, and slammed him face first onto the antique altar, scattering flower petals everywhere. You have the right to remain silent, the agent barked as he wrenched Dylan's arms behind his back. Click. The sound of the handcuffs locking. Brooke didn't move. She just stood there, hyperventilating, tears streaking her perfect makeup, as the IRS agent gently, almost politely, cuffed her hands in front of her. It's a mistake. It's a mistake, she chanted over and over. The agents pulled them both up, and then the walk. They turned them around and began to walk them back up the aisle past their shocked, whispering guests, past Brooke's sobbing mother, past the empty chair where I should have been. They were cuffed, in their wedding clothes. The $500,000 fairy tale over in 30 seconds. As they reached the end of the aisle, the agents pushed them toward the gates past the two terrified security guards. And as they were hustled into the back of the waiting sedan, Dylan looked up. His eyes, wild with hatred and disbelief, found me. He saw me, standing across the street, waiting. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't cheering. I just watched. I held his gaze. I let him see me. The clueless old man. The man he had thrown out. The man who had just taken back his entire world. His face contorted in a mask of pure primal rage. He opened his mouth and screamed a sound of pure animalistic fury, a sound that was cut off as the agent pushed his head down and slammed the car door shut. The black cars pulled away their tires, silent on the expensive pavement. The guests, 150 of them, stood frozen on the lawn, a stunned tableau of pastel dresses and dark suits. They were whispering, staring, their phones still held up, recording the empty space where the bride and groom used to be. I crossed the street, my footsteps feeling heavy on the asphalt. The two security guards who had barred my entry were now pale and sweating, trying to make themselves invisible against the stone pillars. They didn't meet my eyes. I walked right past them through the iron gates. Emily was waiting for me just inside. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. The prosecutor was gone and my daughter was back. She didn't say anything. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I buried my face in her hair and my body began to shake. The rage, the adrenaline, the cold, hard control I had maintained for 2 weeks. It all just broke. It's over, Dad, she whispered, holding me tight. It's finally over. I pulled back, wiping a tear from my cheek with the back of my hand. Yeah, I said, my voice hoarse. Yeah, it is. I looked past her toward the massive white tent set up for the reception. The string quartet had packed up and fled, but the catering staff was still there, frozen in place, holding silver trays of champagne flutes that would never be used. I saw the ice sculptures, the towering floral arrangements, the 5-tier wedding cake. All of it paid for. All of it a monument to a lie. I paid $100,000 for this party. The first payment on the Amex bill that Dylan had conveniently forgotten to pay. The club manager, a frantic man in a tuxedo, was rushing toward me. Mr. Carter, I had no idea. What should we do? The guests. I held up a hand and he stopped talking. I looked at the tent, at the mountains of food. Lobster tails, filet mignon, mountains of shrimp. The guests can leave, I said, my voice firm again. But the food stays. The manager looked confused. Sir, get your staff, I said to him, all business now. I want every plate, every roll, every piece of that ridiculous cake packed up. Get boxes, get foil, get everything. I want all of it ready to move in 1 hour. Move. Move where, Mr. Carter? Call St. Mary's Shelter, I said. And the VA hospital. And every other homeless shelter in this city. Tell them to send their vans. Tell them there's been a change of plans. Tell them Christmas is coming early this year. It took a year, a full, grueling year. Dylan and Brooke were convicted. The evidence Emily and George gathered was so overwhelming, the defense had nothing. They were sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. The loans were voided. The bank, embarrassed by its own lack of due diligence, settled quietly. I recovered most of the $2.4 million, but the victory felt hollow. I went back to Carter Construction, back to my office, but the joy was gone. The place felt tainted. I looked at my son's empty desk, the one I had built for him, and I felt nothing. Just an enormous, crushing fatigue. So I made a decision. I called George, who had been running things in the interim. "George," I said, "I'm done. I'm 71 years old. I don't want to build skyscrapers anymore." I sold the company. Not to a competitor. Not to some faceless corporation. I sold it to the people who had earned it. I created an employee stock ownership plan, an ESOP. I sold Carter Construction, my $300 million baby, to my employees with George as their new CEO. My legacy wouldn't be my blood. It would be my work family. And the money, the $2.4 million I recovered, I used it to start something new. The Sarah Carter Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to elderly parents, people who were victims of financial abuse by their own children. It's quiet now. My big empty house is sold. I live in a smaller place, a condo by the lake. But I spend most of my days in my old workshop, the one behind the house I sold, which I kept. Emily's kids are here today. My grandson Leo is 8. He has Emily's eyes, Sarah's smile. He's standing on a stool holding a small hammer, trying to nail 2 pieces of pine together. "You're holding it wrong, Grandpa," he says, squinting. I laugh. Am I? Show me how it's done, boss." I watch him, his small face a mask of concentration, as he taps the nail, and I feel peace. "You know, Leo," I say, handing him another nail, "the most important thing you can ever build, it's not a building, it's not a company." He looks up at me, his eyes wide. "What is it, Grandpa?" I put my hand on his small shoulder. "It's trust," I say. And trust is the one thing, the only thing, that once it's truly broken, can never ever be fixed just the way it was. This story is a harsh lesson in betrayal and greed. It shows how greed can make children view their elderly parents not as family, but as clueless old men to be exploited. Dylan and Brooke's methodical plan to steal millions and bankrupt their own father was calculated, but they made one fatal mistake: they underestimated him. Using his loyal allies, George and his ADA daughter, Emily Ben, proved that true strength isn't just in building an empire, but in the wisdom to protect it. Trust is the ultimate foundation, and once shattered, it can never be rebuilt the same way. This story warns that blinding greed leads to underestimation. Dylan and Brooke saw their father as a clueless old man to bankrupt. They forgot the man who built an empire knew how to protect it. He used wisdom and loyal allies to deliver devastating consequences, proving trust is the one asset that once broken is gone forever.